This story takes us deep into the deserts of Arizona, where an encounter with a being that many fear and few dare to speak of left one person forever changed. Now, this post was shared by Curious My Nature 1010 2 months ago on Reddit, and while their account may be brief, the details are enough to make anyone think twice about the unknown. It was 2008, and the user was near the old jail on 29th Street, a remote area with only a few homes back then. They were hanging out with a friend, surrounded by the quiet expanse of the desert, the kind of place where silence feels mostly heavy and not to mention alive. While sitting in a truck, something would catch this person's attention. Now, this feeling wasn't just paranoia or anxiety or a sense of dread, but this was something much deeper, something spiritual. They felt an overwhelming urge to look to their right, as if some unseen force was guiding them, and when they did, they saw it. Hovering there, about 8 to 10 feet tall, was a figure unlike anything they had ever seen. Its face and torso were hidden, but the creature's legs were clearly visible, not to mention long and muscular, like a horse's. And its feet? Well, they weren't human. They were in fact hooves. But what stood out the most were the horns, which curved forward on top of its head, adding to its towering, menacing presence. The being was moving toward them slowly, and that's when reality seemed to freeze. Time itself felt suspended. The user was completely frozen, unable to move, speak, or even process what they were seeing. But the person in the truck wasn't frozen. They were screaming, urging the user to get back inside. Somehow, they managed to do it, and this was despite their body feeling heavy with fear. Once inside the vehicle, the pair were so scared that they couldn't even drive. Their mind and body refused to cooperate. It wasn't until the user grabbed the wheel and, together, they would find enough courage to speed away, escaping what felt like an inevitable encounter with something beyond human comprehension. Years have passed, but the memory of that night has lingered. It wasn't until a medicine man cleansed their body that the full weight of the encounter began to make sense. And in fact, the night before the cleansing, the pair had seen a coyote, an important figure in many Native American spiritual traditions, which ultimately seemed to validate the cleansing as well as the strange feelings that Curious My Nature 1010 had felt that night in the desert. The user also mentioned that in their dreams now, they've begun to see more symbols. The coyote again, as well as the javelina. They've reported that both creatures have guided them through spiritual journeys, offering hints at a deeper connection between the Skinwalker as well as their own life. And to this day, they believe that the encounter may have been a warning, possibly from their ancestors, pushing them to leave the person that they were with, a decision that may have saved them from something darker. And while the user heeded the warning and was able to escape, they did make one thing very clear. These beings aren't to be sought after, and what might seem like a message for some could in fact be a dangerous encounter in disguise for others.
Welcome to Real Horror Stories, where we dive into true encounters submitted by people just like you. Tonight's story comes from Timely Cheesecake 40, posted only 19 hours ago on Reddit, and what you're about to hear happened in Melbourne, Australia, and is still unfolding as we speak. It all started like most real-life paranormal encounters do, with the small things. Tim had been spending a lot of time at his partner's house, which was close to a forested area. The house itself was relatively new, only about 25 years old. But early on, his partner warned him that strange things happened there. At first, it seemed harmless enough. Footsteps in empty rooms, lights flickering, and doors acting on their own. Maybe harmless is not the best word to use to describe this experience, but his partner would even go on to share something that she labeled as terrifying, waking up in the middle of the night to the sensation of being choked. As she gasped for air, she saw a tall, dark figure looming over her in bed. Understandably, this left her shaken. But as time passed, both Tim and her got used to the occasional disturbances and learned how to live with them. But over the past few months, and remember, this is recent, things started to escalate. One night, his partner had a friend over and they ordered food. She went to use the bathroom and, on her way back to the living room, she heard it. A male voice whispered right into her ear, "How did you like that?" It was so loud, so close, that she couldn't brush it off. The fear was real. Even though she cleansed the house afterwards, believing it might help, it wouldn't stop what was coming next. Tim began noticing more unsettling events. Locked doors starting to open by themselves. There were banging sounds, not just random thuds, but almost like something trying to break through the walls. And then 2 weeks ago, while watching football in the living room, Tim heard it too, a male voice whispering in his ear. He couldn't make out the words, but the sensation was enough to send a chill down his spine. Then, in the same moment, every single light in the kitchen turned on. The room filled with an eerie glow, and one of the children's toys, a flashing wand, lit up on its own. There was no explanation for it. He turned everything off quickly, but the sense of being watched lingered. He went to bed feeling uneasy, but the disturbances only got worse. Nearly every night, they were woken by loud bangs echoing through the house. And last night, which was September 15th, once again, Tim was in bed, his partner asleep beside him. And this was when suddenly, the ceiling fan switched on at full speed. Now, this fan requires a remote to operate. It's not something that could be triggered accidentally. The remote was on the nightstand, pointing away from the fan. The surge of noise woke his partner, and before Tim could process what was happening, he looked toward the doorway and saw it. It was once again a tall, dark figure, at least 7 feet tall, standing at the doorway. It didn't linger long. It moved, stepping away from the door and into the adjoining lounge. Tim couldn't explain what he saw. It was there, and then it was just gone. But that wasn't the end. The next morning, as Tim was heading out for the gym, he heard it again, banging, as if something was trapped inside the house. He tried to ignore it, leaving for his workout. Later, his partner came home after dropping his kids at school and going to the gym herself, and the banging was still there, and it was so loud that she refused to go inside alone. And as if that wasn't enough, just 2 nights ago, that's September 14th, Tim was choked in his sleep, just like his partner had been months before. He woke up gasping for air, with his heart pounding, and with no logical explanation of what had happened. And now, the couple believe that something is building in the house, growing in strength, and also feeding off their fear. Strangely enough, the spirit doesn't seem to affect them when the kids are home. But when it's just the two of them, it's sure to make its presence known. The couple is at a loss for what to do next, and they've sought advice publicly. But where do you even begin when faced with something like this? As they try to figure out their next steps, one thing remains clear. Whatever is in that house doesn't seem like it's going to go away anytime soon. This second story was submitted by Practical Value 6535 on Reddit just 4 days ago. Now, this is a brief but chilling experience that left the user questioning reality. And though the account is short, the figure described is one that's known to many, the Hatman. But as always, we'll let you decide what to believe. One night, the user was trying to fall asleep when something unusual happened. A shadowy figure appeared in the corner of the room, tall, dark, and unnerving. The figure wore a wide-brimmed hat and a long trench coat. It didn't move. It simply stood there, looming in the dark. The user stared, frozen, waiting for the figure to do something. But it didn't. It just stood there, almost as if it was watching. Then, in an instant, it vanished, and the room fell back into silence, leaving behind an unsettling chill. Now, although this encounter was brief, it would go down as one of the most paranormal moments in the user's life. And as eerie as this sounds, the Hatman is no stranger to those who've had similar encounters. Now, the figure described in this story is often referred to as the Hatman, a dark silhouette that has been reported by people all over the world. Always wearing a distinctive hat and a long coat, the Hatman is known for appearing at night, often while the person is lying in bed or in a half-wake state. What makes him stand out from other shadow figures that have been reported is his chilling consistency in appearance as well as behavior. For decades, people from different countries, cultures, and backgrounds have shared nearly identical accounts of this mysterious figure. Some describe him as standing still in the corner of their room, just as the user above did, while others report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread in his presence. One of the most well-known accounts, in fact, comes from a woman in the United States, where she recalled waking up in the middle of the night to find the Hatman standing at the foot of her bed, staring down at her with his featureless face. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, and as she tried to break away from her paralysis, the figure slowly disappeared into the shadows. And then another instance in Germany, where a man reported seeing the Hatman standing in the hallway outside his bedroom door. He described the figure as menacing, but not physically threatening, more like an observer, quietly watching. And yet, the fear that he felt was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The question is the Hatman a shared hallucination brought on by sleep paralysis, or is he something much more? Many believe that he's a supernatural entity, perhaps even a spirit or a demon. Others think that he's a product of the human mind, manifesting when we're in that vulnerable state between sleep and wakefulness. One thing is for certain, the Hatman isn't tied to any specific place or person. His appearances are once again random, his presence undeniable, and his victims often feel helpless in his gaze. If you've ever seen something like the Hatman or have had an encounter that you can't explain, let us know in the comments.
In May 2001, the streets of New Delhi, India, were consumed by panic as reports emerged of a shadowy, part human, part monkey figure. Known as the Monkey Man, this mysterious creature was said to roam the city's dark alleys, leaping from rooftops and attacking unsuspecting victims. Eyewitness accounts describe the Monkey Man as a figure around 4 to 5 feet tall, covered in black hair with glowing red eyes. Some even claim it had metallic claws or wore a helmet. Though no one could agree on its exact appearance, the terror it invoked was all too real. New Delhi in 2001 was a city of contrasts, where bustling modern life met with deeply rooted traditions. At the time, the city faced a variety of challenges, from socioeconomic inequality to frequent power outages, particularly in poorer areas like East Delhi. These neighborhoods, often deprived of adequate infrastructure, were more vulnerable to the stress and confusion caused by such an extraordinary event. This environment, with its overcrowded streets and overworked law enforcement, created the perfect conditions for fear and panic to spread quickly. With power outages becoming more frequent, especially at night, many residents were already living on edge, and the sudden appearance of the Monkey Man only added to the already existing tension. During this time, over 350 reported sightings of the creature caused widespread fear throughout the city. Around 60 people claimed to have been injured in encounters with the Monkey Man, and tragically, several people lost their lives, including a pregnant woman and a man who fell from rooftops while fleeing in panic. The reports of the Monkey Man were so widespread that news reporters from across the country flocked to New Delhi. Most reports indicated that the Monkey Man was active at midnight, targeting individuals who were alone. Many claimed to have encountered the creature on terraces, describing the attacks where it would strike and then flee. In spite of the surge of complaints, law enforcement was unable to produce any concrete evidence. No footprints, blood, or forced entry, leaving officers frustrated. They established special hotlines and offered a 50,000 rupee reward for information, but the elusive creature remained at large. Every night, hundreds of calls would flood into the police stations, with citizens claiming to have seen the Monkey Man. Police teams were dispatched to investigate, but each time they arrived at the scene, the creature was nowhere to be found. Nevertheless, the police had no choice but to continue their investigations, knowing that even if the Monkey Man was just a hoax, The public's belief in the creature was very real, and so were the consequences of that belief. The variety of descriptions given by witnesses added to the confusion. Some claimed to see the creature moving at unnatural speeds, almost as if it could teleport from one spot to another, while others reported seeing it leap great distances from rooftop to rooftop. Witnesses spoke of its glowing red eyes, piercing the darkness, and in some accounts, it seemed to attack with animalistic aggression, clawing at victims before disappearing into the shadows. While some citizens dismissed these encounters as pranks or hysteria, others were convinced that something truly supernatural was stalking the streets of New Delhi. Each new report only deepened the sense of unease, fueling the growing legend. Amid the growing chaos, one individual suggested that many attacks occurred during power cuts, speculating that the figure might have connections to the city's power supply. With fear outpacing police efforts, residents began organizing vigilante groups, armed with clubs, knives, and wooden poles, to patrol the streets at night. Many of these groups operated under the assumption that the Monkey Man was real, and they were determined to protect their communities. Unfortunately, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Rumors spread rapidly, with the reports of sightings flooding in from every corner of the city. This growing sense of paranoia led to tragic incidents, as mobs, driven by fear, mistook innocent people for the creature. In one case, a homeless man was brutally beaten when he was found sleeping near an alley where the Monkey Man had reportedly been seen. As fear gripped the city, residents armed themselves and retreated indoors by early evening. Despite these precautions, reports of attacks continued, and the police released detailed reports about the victims. Most were men between 20 and 30 years old, and a large portion of the victims came from poorer sections of East Delhi. Investigations into the injuries revealed that most victims had abrasions which could have been caused by blunt or pointed objects. The psychological impact of the Monkey Man on the citizens of New Delhi at this point was profound. Experts in mass hysteria suggested that this incident was an example of a social contagion, where fear spreads quickly and affects the perceptions of reality for many people. In India, a country where folklore and myths hold cultural significance, the idea of a supernatural creature was not easily dismissed by the public. Many locals linked the Monkey Man to ancient legends, interpreting the creature as a divine punishment sent to terrorize the city as a consequence of the sins of its people. Religious leaders weighed in, with some viewing the Monkey Man as a sign of divine retribution, while others called for calm. However, in a city gripped by fear, such voices were often drowned out by rumors and exaggerated tales of new sightings. In response to the escalating situation, the local power company suspended rolling blackouts in poorer areas, which allowed residents to stay safely indoors. Despite these measures, nearly 50 new claims were made daily. However, many reports were later revealed to be hoaxes, which overshadowed genuine incidents. As more of these fake reports emerged, it became harder for authorities to discern the real threat. Throughout the crisis, the police increased patrols and made arrests to deter pranksters. The threat of jail time and fines reduced the number of prank calls and hoaxes, and as media coverage waned, the phenomenon began to fade. By May 20, sightings had slowed to a trickle, and the Monkey Man seemed to vanish. One day, the press reported that the Monkey Man was a myth, and shockingly, not a single case was reported thereafter. However, the story doesn't end there. In a surprising twist, after the Monkey Man seemed to have disappeared, in Mumbai, reports of a similar creature began to surface just a few years after the events in New Delhi. Witnesses described a figure that resembled the Monkey Man, leaping between buildings and attacking people late at night. However, unlike in Delhi, where the creature seemed to target the poorer neighborhoods, the sightings in Mumbai were more evenly spread across the city. Law enforcement in Mumbai took a more proactive stance, increasing police patrols and launching a citywide investigation. Meanwhile, in northeastern India, rumors of the Monkey Man were dismissed by local officials as copycat hoaxes. Despite this, the panic spread, with dozens of new sightings being reported before the phenomenon eventually faded. Yet, as mysteriously as it began, the phenomenon vanished, and there have been no sightings for over a decade. The Monkey Man could have been an urban legend or a prankster, or perhaps a more mysterious figure, a human-monkey hybrid. Some speculated that the creature was an escaped experiment from a nearby research facility, part of a secret government project involving genetic engineering. This theory gained traction in certain conspiracy circles, with people pointing to the creature's metallic claws and helmet-like appearance. These theories, though lacking in evidence, contributed to the lasting mystery of the Monkey Man. Regardless, the question of why the creature suddenly stopped remains unanswered.
If you enjoyed these 3 true stories, don't forget to like and subscribe to Real Horror Stories for more real-life paranormal encounters. And if you've had your own experience with the unknown, please do let us know in the comments, as your story might be the next that we share. But until then, remember, not everything that moves in the shadows is human.
If you found this true story interesting, our previous episode on the actual true story behind The Exorcist is worth checking out. It should pop up on the end screen any second now. Oh, and most importantly, have a ghoulish good night.